You can now play Meta-Knightmare Ultra. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Superstar Ultra. In the last part, we finished off Revenge of the King all in one session, and now it's time for another one of the campaigns they added over here into Superstar Ultra, Meta-Knightmare Ultra. That cool knight's reappeared. Defeat his foes to store power, then touch the screen to use abilities. He trains as he journeys. If Revenge of the King is a spring breeze, this is a Meta Knight's revenge and unlike any of the other campaigns, they actually force you into the tutorial for this one because Meta Knight has abilities that Kirby can never use. Which is weird because at the end of the day, Meta Knight himself controls like an upgraded sword, Kirby? His sword has some extra affinities to it. For instance, it can take down pegs that stone or hammer can. It can light fuses on fire. But by and large, he is a sword Kirby. Whenever you take out an enemy, a blue orb appears and the Meta Knight automatically absorbs it. That gives you 1 point down there on the bottom screen. Some enemies, namely larger ones and bosses, can give large orbs which give 5. You can use those points on any of those 4 abilities down there. Meta Quick increases your running speed. Heal heals you up, I believe, to max. Mach Tornado is a screen nuke that should be mostly saved on boss fights. And Night Call summons a helper for Meta Knight, usually a blade or sword knight. I'm not sure what determines which one's going to show up. It's usually one over the other in my experience. But you might be noticing, this is Spring Breeze level design. Meta-Knightmare Ultra is ultimately just a power stomp through most of the campaigns present in the original Kirby Superstar. Gourmet Race isn't here, but we're going through Spring Breeze, into Dynablade, into Great Cave Offensive, into Meta Knight's Revenge, into Milky Way Wishes, all in a row, with save points at the end of every individual campaign. It means ultimately you're just kind of playing through the game in a different playstyle. Knightmare and Dreamland notably had something similar in its Meta-Knightmare, which I didn't do in that LP. But if you want to complete Superstar Ultra, you need to play through this, which is a good thing and bad thing. I think Meta Knight's moveset and the bottom screen mechanic here actually makes this feel a lot different to play. But to watch, it's ultimately gonna be a lot of the same. So, and I'll remind you about this next part. The way we're structuring this particular campaign is this part we're doing at normal speed. This part being, I believe, all of Spring Breeze and Dynablade. But next part, we're gonna speed through Great Cave Offensive, Meta Knight's Revenge, and Milky Way Wishes with post-speed up. Barring boss fights we've seen only once or twice in that playthrough, for instance, Heavy Lobster's always going to be sped up and all that, just to help this move by faster, because once you've played one world of this, you've technically seen all that's new. The main attraction of this is similarly to some of the other campaigns. It's entirely ranked in your time. You can get a best time, compete against your friends, do all that, try to make it faster and faster. And there is an element of that that's fun, but you can nail down basically every boss strategy too. Do the 1-2-3 combo, maybe do the tornado attack by dashing, jumping, and pressing B, I think. And using Mach Tornado, because Mach Tornado will not one-shot every boss, but in most cases take out about half their health at the least. Maybe a third of their health at the least, rather. There's only really even one boss fight that doesn't happen to. It does ultimately reward you for playing through this, though, because you do get a unique final boss at the end of it. And I'm at least glad you don't have to do Return of the King either, because that would be rough. With that said, let's get the full difference list of what's different between Meta Knight and Kirby's playthroughs, main mechanics aside out front. I've already mentioned that you go through all the stages in a row. Invincibility candies, Maximum Tomatoes, copy essences, and treasures are replaced with just standard food items, and where standard food items are otherwise in the game are just straight up gone. We're gonna get unique cutscenes between each of the campaigns just to kind of bridge them. You're forced to do the Iron Man fight in Dynablade. Any place that's non-essential in Great Cave Offensive, like whenever you get those 2 3-way paths that you're supposed to go to get all the treasures, the non-essential doors are removed, so it's just a straightforward path, and that actually leads to one very funny occurrence I'll mention directly in the video when we get there. They completely skip the one half stage in Milky Way Wishes. You go straight from the final, the main planets, over to Nova, and the final boss is different. That's really it. This would become a tradition for Kirby games, though, because while it was technically started in Nightmare and Dreamland, this I think was only the second time we'd seen it, and with mini campaigns like this in particular became a lot more common, especially in the 3DS, where you'd get like a Meta-Knight mode or something of the sort. It's a way to help spice the game up and give it more post-game, which I can appreciate. It's just one of those things we're commentating over. It's probably going to get a little rough. One thing I do wish they did, though, just to make this playthrough a little spicy, and this could have been funny, is they also just throw exactly one Revenge of the King boss at you, and I know I'll keep swapping between that and Return because I can never remember which it is. If right after this Krakow fight, they threw you into a Kabula fight from that, but you controlling the halberd, that could have been funny. One other thing I should note, by the way, on top of Mach Tornado already being very high in damage, I believe Meta-Knight's sword might have a higher strength value and, like, stun value, if that's even a thing, than Kirby's sword. Like, it is more like he's wielding a hammer in some regards. And in that regard, he's very, he completely melts bosses. It's kind of a shame. But I also kind of appreciate the power chip angle of it. Sometimes stuff like this is hard to judge. Also, I believe if you look in the background in some parts of it, Mario and Luigi are in this crowd? Or was that only in the original game? I can never quite remember. In between, you also get a brief update on how your time's doing, so you can take a look at whether or not you're probably going to beat your last pace or something like that, and the save room happens, and then you go into the next one. Something I find funny, by the way, and I don't think I mentioned this back in the actual playthrough of Dynablade, but the Kirby Superstar Ultra version of Dynablade's fight theme is actually more directly based off Dynablade's theme from Kirby Air Ride, which I suppose at the end of the day is also based off of her fight theme from the original Superstar, but there's some instrumentation differences overall, if memory serves. Kirby is a very big fan of remixing prior music in some form or another for some stages, even if it's only some parts of some stages. The 3DS games are especially guilty of this, but Superstar Ultra is also very guilty of this itself. For instance, one of the mini games that was exclusive for Superstar Ultra, Snack Tracks, we'll show it down the line. Its main theme is a remix of a Kirby 64 song. Similarly, I think a rest area theme, one of the new arenas, is a remix of a Kirby 64 song, and there's a couple of other things like that throughout that I don't remember off the top of my head. There's a lot of them. And I appreciate Kirby actually going out of its way to pay homage to and remix earlier music more often. Because a couple of series do that, like, every game, but only a few do a lot of it in every game. Usually it'll be like, here's the Mario area where they play the Mario 2 USA character select theme. Here's the Mario 3 remix. Things like that. Outside of games like Smash, at least, because that's all about celebrating the games to begin with. Also, I probably should note, because I didn't say this directly, the Meta Heal also heals whichever of the Knights is with Meta Knight. So you can just rely on that the entire time, and there's more than enough enemies that you defeat throughout to just get your bank up of points just so high. Like, there's a reason the Mach Tornado costs 30. Like, that's a lot, but you build it up so quickly. Like, even going out of your way to do minor combat rooms like this that have otherwise no point for Meta Knight can just help you build up such a stock. If in some ways, while there's more of a combat rush to the campaign, it's overall probably in some ways easier until the final boss, and even then, having the heal makes the final boss in some ways easier because you can just heal on command, rather than not having any healing items for the entirety of a boss fight. I do wish more games still did a optional second player, or second playthrough like this, where you play someone completely different. Note, I say optional because I'm not talking about those games, like, especially common in 7th gen, early 8th gen, where it's like, You have the choice of this character or this character, but in order to see the true ending, you need to play both. Their gameplay is exactly the same outside of some minor mechanics. I'm more mean, like just a short, optional, different character playthrough. Sort of like Mega Man Powered Up, how you can get Mega Man, the various different Mega Man, the Robot Masters and Proto Man to play through those stages as, if you do enough. Stuff like that I find fun. If only because it just encourages replays without being, like, forceful with it. Although if there was a trophy to it, it might as well be forceful because I would go for that shit. It's really a problem, honestly. Like, I did the Platinum Trophy for Trails from Zero recently. And I'm waiting for Azure to come out to play more of them because I have all 4 Cold Steels. But I've looked at some of the stuff for Cold Steel's trophies. And I just... oh, fear. Maybe if it's like how Zero handled it, it won't be too bad, but oh no. Oh no. You know, thinking about it, I think Kirby and the Amazing Mirror could have been more interesting to me if Meta-Knight and Kirby's roles in the stories were switched. Obviously, if you haven't played that or seen that LP, go watch that. But for those who don't care, I think if Kirby was the one who was put in the mirror, maybe, and Meta-Knight had to rescue him, getting all sorts of new sword skills along the way to actively have, like, Metroid-like mobility upgrades, that could have been a much better Metroid-like. And I know it's partially just because in some ways it's meant to be Baby's first Metroid, but I'd argue, again, that Baby's first Metroid should be, like, Metroid Zero Mission or Metroid Prime or things like that. Mind you, I also just have very particular tastes when it comes to my Metroids. Like, I overall prefer the games to try to be more Metroid than Castlevania. When Castlevania went Metroid, even though I still love those games, and you get games like Time Spinner that are so derivative of the Castlevania side of things that's borderline parody on level design aspects, if not plagiarism. I still liked that game, though. It had a cool story. Oh, something I probably should mention. The biggest control difference between Meta-Knight and Kirby is actually the glide. When you're Kirby, you puff up and you float. But with Meta-Knight, your jump is treated more like wing, in that you have to mash the button a lot more to get any kind of ascension. But your wings also count as an attack to things directly above you. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but it works. And if you're looking for a real good combat tip, do the jump slash. Either the spinning one or the one where you just do a downward strike. It does a lot of damage. In some ways, though, Meta-Knightmare Ultra really does kind of highlight the very scattered difficulty curve for the main level design of Superstar, if only because you're playing through most of the original Omnibus in a row. And I guess I brought up that I'd rather each of these mini-campaigns in some ways just be their own longer, main, full games. But there's also a factor of how much could they really carry on these mechanics alone in some cases. Kirby, I think, could do just because Kirby doesn't got a lot going on to begin with compared to some other stuff. But I do at least want to acknowledge the fact that, even though I disagree overall with it, I at least admire why Sakurai and team decided to make it like the whole shorter mini-campaign style. Because they wanted to kind of capitalize how games were really starting to get longer back in the mid-90s, and they wanted to have games that could be easily completed within a single session or two, and are very digestible, and I can appreciate that. My problem with this, and we'll get more into this as we go into my thoughts on Superstar Ultra as a whole, it leads to some problem with focus, and I find that inconsistency kind of hard to get over in some cases. It's like if a Final Fantasy game, in my eyes, changed its main mechanic halfway through 4 times. You just don't do that for a game with that much going on. But that also has that much going on, I guess, at the end of the day. Another little behind-the-scenes fact about the game, though. In development, the team was going to call the game something along the lines of Kirby of the Stars Active, because of the game's more proactive gameplay than what had been done prior. But the final title ended up being created by Shigesato Itoi, the creator of the Earthbound Mother series. Which I just find funny, given in some ways there's a couple of tonal parallels you could draw between Kirby and Earthbound, between its cute exterior, but at times very dark underlying themes, especially once you start getting towards some of the later games. I find that funny. I feel like Meta-Knightmare Ultra probably could have also benefited a little bit from, even if they didn't bring in the level design from, say, Revenge of the King, at least bringing in some of the newer enemies from that so they get a little more time to breathe. Fight the upgraded Buronto birds and all those in a couple of the stages, maybe the further in you get. Just add a little more of a difficulty curve to the stages, but I guess ultimately it's not too needed. And I'll repeat this particular information again at the very end of the LP because it's what I like to do. Not for nothing, Superstar's a pretty easy game to find in terms of like playing it on modern consoles, because there's the DS version if you have any kind of a DS that you can play it on. There's the original Super Nintendo console version. It was on both the Wii and Wii U virtual consoles, so even though those aren't like downloadable anymore, there's at least a version out there you could probably find a way to get on those consoles without having to like go full emulator. And I want to say it's on the Nintendo Switch Online. And it's also in the Kirby Dream Collection, which is something I never picked up, but that's a giant 20th anniversary collection that contains Dreamland Adventure, Dreamland 2, Superstar, Dreamland 3, and Kirby 64. But I'll cover more about the collection next time, as well as when I eventually get to Kirby 64, because these are the only two games I haven't covered yet, technically, from that collection. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 12, we literally speed through the rest of Meta-Knightmare Ultra. See you guys then.